Jack, I have a couple of Senate-related questions to ask you, and these should be easy lifts for you. One of them is a little bit of a curveball in as much as you and I didn't talk about it before you came on today. We don't talk about a lot of these things because you're on top of all of it. But here's the deal. So I'm fascinated with your colleagues on the left. I constantly ask you to explain to me what they're thinking, and I know that's a very difficult task sometimes. So there's a bill that just passed the Senate. It passed 25-5. I believe every Republican voted in favor of it. And it would require Tennessee public schools to include in curriculum certain keys to a successful life. That would include a sequence of events, high school, job, higher ed, marriage, and children, that helps people live a good and productive life. The proposal advancing through the state's Republican legislature, or Republican-led legislature, has now passed the Senate 25-5. What can you tell us about this piece of legislation and why you support it?
Well, our high schools, our middle schools and high schools have the option of teaching what we refer to as family life curriculum. Certainly parents can opt their kids out of this, but they can also allow them to go through it. And it talks about, some not adult-oriented things, but some kind of facts of life type things. Back in days previous, you might have referred to it as sex ed education. And this is important to me because several years ago, I actually sponsored legislation to rewrite this curriculum and make sure that it was, let's just say it reflected Tennessee values. Because we've all heard horror stories about things being taught in our public schools that none of us would want our kids being exposed to. But there's a responsible way to do it. So Senator Janice Bowling had a bill that simply added that curriculum should include information to teach to kids that, you have a higher chance of success in life if you do the following things. Graduate from high school, get a job, or pursue some type of higher education. That could be a certificated program, a TCAT, learn to be a welder. It could be a 4-year university. Get a job, and don't have a child until you are married. And if you talk to any social scientist out there, they will tell you that if someone does that, their chances of being successful and avoiding poverty go up significantly. Mm-hmm. I mean, your chances of living life in poverty, go up significantly if you don't adhere to those precepts. So that's what the bill did. The debate on the floor went crazy, saying that we were teaching that single moms are bad, that single dads are bad. No, we're not. It didn't have anything to do with that. So it's pretty common sense stuff. And but the Democrats didn't see fit, and they didn't think that that's an appropriate thing to be teaching our kids. Graduate from high school, either get a job, pursue higher education, and wait till you're married to have a child.
It is a regular fascination of mine, Jack, that we empower the state to help us hand our kids off to a platform by which we have an expectation that our young children are going to be educated on a lot of different things, a lot of book learning, a lot of math, and a lot of reading, and a lot of, all of those types of things, arithmetic and whatnot. But when it comes to teaching them certain life skills, the Democrats suddenly start howling, and they make all of these suggestions, and you alluded to it, that somehow you're casting aspersions about people that did not grow up in certain types of families. No one is saying any of that. Statistically, it is time and time again. It's not something that really can be refuted through empirical data, that if you have a 2-parent home, that the stress levels go down in that home, the opportunities for success go up in that home. That is not, but for my grandfather, I would have grown up in a single mother household, right? So no one is casting aspersions when we say, hey, let's let people know what the best way to get this done is while they're at a young enough age that they can kind of be conscious of it before they make decisions that are going to make their road a little harder.
Well, you and I both know, and I'm sure all your listeners do, we know people that are single parents that do an amazing job of raising their kids. We know people who are raised by their grandparents, or they, due to illness, or in the case of your mother with for cancer. We all know people, and the kids have turned out amazing. There are no absolutes in social science at all. But as you said, the empirical statistical data says that if you do those simple things, your chances of avoiding poverty, and that's kind of the benchmark we use. If you want to avoid poverty, Mr. 15-year-old or Miss 15-year-old student there in school, if you do these things, graduate from high school, get a job, go to higher education, wait till you're married to have a child, your chances of success in life go up exponentially. That's factual. That's not denigrating anyone. That's not criticizing anyone who found themselves in a different form of life. And we should equip our kids with those basic tenets so that they're ready to succeed in life. It's that simple.
Well, I'm amazed that the same group of people, and going back to the political side of this debate, Jack, the same group of people that suggest that the Republicans are coming after public education and trying to destroy education. Every time you try to make public education better, they attack you too. And
one final point on this, Matt, and I want to be clear. I want your listeners to be clear relative to this family life curriculum. It is permissive on the part of parents. Parents are notified that this curriculum will be, and they have an opportunity to review it. Is this something that I feel appropriate for my kids? Mm-hmm. So even if you disagree, you can opt for your kids not to receive this curriculum. So it's not something even in public schools that kids have to take. But some parents choose to think, yeah, this is good. I want my kids to hear this. They may hear it at home, but it's not going to hurt for them to hear it from their teachers as well.
Senator Jack Johnson is with us. He is the Senate Majority Leader in the General Assembly and the Tennessee legislative body. The other big piece that I saw this week, Jack, was a resolution that would prohibit the Tennessee General Assembly from establishing any or to increase the state property tax, and it would offer a referendum to the people of the state of Tennessee, giving the people an opportunity to decide to constitutionally state that there will be no statewide property tax. I might be mangling what it does in my opening here, but tell me what you guys voted on and why you were supportive of this.
Absolutely. And no, you didn't mangle it at all. So a lot of folks don't realize, Matt, that, in Tennessee, we're blessed. We talk about it all the time. We don't have a state income tax. We get the vast majority of our revenue from consumption tax, which I think is a good way to get your revenue. Mm-hmm. We don't have a statewide property tax. Well, technically we do. Believe it or not, technically Tennessee has in statute a statewide property tax. Now, we all pay property taxes to, own your home or business. If you own real estate, you pay property taxes to your local government, your city or your county. You don't pay it to the state, but it's not because we don't have a property tax. It's that the rate is set at zero right now and has been since the 1940s. So it's been a long time since the state. In some states, you pay property taxes to the state in addition to your local governments. So we just felt like we haven't used that tax in, 80 years, and we should remove it as much as we did the state income tax. We didn't have a state income tax, but let's go ahead and constitutionally protect Tennesseans from that tax ever being imposed. So much as we amended our Constitution a few years ago to ban a state income tax, this resolution that we passed in the Senate on this week, it was Wednesday, I believe, that will provide for a referendum or a ratification opportunity to go before the voters of Tennessee in November of 26 on the next gubernatorial ballot. And if a majority of Tennesseans who vote in the governor's race vote, then we will amend our Constitution to ban a state property tax. Now, I'm always quick to say, amending the Constitution is difficult, and it should be. It's not something you do willy-nilly. Mm-hmm. You have to pass this resolution through one General Assembly by at least a simple majority. That happened in the 113th last year. It has to pass through the subsequent General Assembly. We're now in the 114th by a 2/3 majority vote in both House and Senate. And if and only then can it go before the voters for their ratification. So I think it's a good move. Again, haven't had a property tax statewide, state-assessed levied property tax in 80 years. Probably not going to have it anytime soon. But let's go ahead and put it in the Constitution so we take that option off the table.
All right, so your job in terms of this process, the Senate's job is now complete then?
That is correct. And I don't believe it's been taken up on the House floor for the 2/3 vote that's required. That'll happen soon, probably in the next week or two. I suspect it to easily achieve that 2/3 margin in the House as well. And then that will set it up, ultimately, as it should be, for the voters to decide if they would like to see their Constitution amended to prohibit this tax, and it would go before the voters in November of 2026.
And that's a simple majority, obviously, for the voters?
It is uniquely, uniquely, and I don't expect it to even be close, but it has to be a majority of those who vote in the governor's race. So interestingly, this is getting into the weeds, but if for some reason in November of 2026 you went to vote, and perhaps you vote for U.S. Senate, you vote for state Senate, you vote for state House, whatever else, but you don't vote in the governor's race, then your vote for or against the amendment does not count. So I'm sure most people would vote in the governor's race, so that's why I say it's a simple majority of those who vote in the gubernatorial election.
You taught me something, too, today. I want to make sure that I heard it correctly. So for a referendum to go before the voters in order to change the Constitution of the state of Tennessee, you have to you have to vote that referendum through a simple majority for one session and then a 2/3 majority in the subsequent session.
I'm going to modify that slightly. It's not a session. It is a General Assembly. A General Assembly is 2 years.
Okay,
so you
sure.
have two regular sessions.
Sure.
And it can be in either of those sessions that you pass
got it. Okay, yeah.
Either the first or second session. But yes, first General Assembly by simple majority. And by the way, when we had this, and it's a resolution that goes through each chamber, and when it was brought before both the Senate and House, it easily achieved the 2/3 majority on the first consideration when it only needed to achieve a simple majority. So that gives you an indication, and I think it fell along a party line vote as well in our chamber. But
it's first blush on it, but I kind of like that. It forces careful consideration to change the Constitution of the state.
Yes, it does. And that's why I say we take that very seriously. And ultimately, the General Assembly cannot amend the Constitution. Only the voters of Tennessee can. It is the General Assembly who can decide whether to give voters that opportunity. But for it to be fully ratified, the voters of Tennessee have to decide that they want to amend their Constitution. And I agree. That's a really good way to do that.
And I want to finish this thought on this note. 6719 says, wait a minute. To be clear, this is not a bill to increase property taxes. This is a bill to amend the state constitution to prevent property taxes from ever happening. That's correct, right?
By the state government. This in no way affects the ability of your city or county to assess, but that is correct. It is to prohibit the state government from assessing a tax on your property.
I mean, if this were to happen, and just to give some people some clarity, if this were to happen today, right, there would be no impact on the amount of property tax you're paying because the state currently assesses at zero.
That is exactly right. Much like with the state income tax, we amended our Constitution to prohibit a state income tax. We didn't have one, but the General Assembly had the constitutional authority to impose a state income tax. So while that would never happen under the current composition of our General Assembly, nor would it ever happen that we would assess a statewide property tax. But we don't know what's going to happen down the road. And so by amending the Constitution, it takes it out of the hands of the General Assembly that even if they wanted to assess a statewide property tax, they would not be able to unless they went back and amended the Constitution again to remove this prohibition.